Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be discussing a pretty heavily debated topic that a lot of console players struggle with: high sensitivity versus low sensitivity. There's a reason why sensitivity is an aspect of Fortnite that people really care about. If you watch any of the really big Fortnite streamers, you're probably going to see the exclamation point sens command typed in their chat every 60 seconds or so, and it never really stops. Trying to aim and play Fortnite in general with a sensitivity that you don't feel comfortable with is pretty frustrating to say the least, so I totally get why a lot of players are constantly switching and looking for new values to try. Now, when it comes to choosing certain sensitivity values, there's always going to be a trade-off when it comes to high sense versus low sense. Higher sensitivity obviously gives you faster crosshair movement, while lower sensitivity gives you more precision. And when it comes to individual sensitivity categories, I think sometimes a higher sensitivity is better, and other times you want to go lower. So we're going to be going one by one through the main sensitivity categories in Fortnite, and I'll discuss whether I believe higher or lower is better and why that's the case. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so let's start this video off with probably the most popular sensitivity category in Fortnite: non-ADS or look sensitivity. So first off, I think we should define high versus low sensitivity here. In my opinion, anything lower than 40% for X or Y would be considered low, and then anything over about 45% would be considered high. I'm sure some people will disagree with that, and that's totally fine, but I think that's a solid baseline for look sensitivity specifically. Now, I've actually changed my opinion about this compared to the last few seasons, and here's why. Over the last 3 to 5 months or so before Season 4 began, the meta on console Fortnite when it came to close range fights was a ton of SMG usage because they were so overpowered, and then the most popular shotgun was probably the TAC. So this meant that the majority of close range fights involved a lot of spraying and probably a lot of jumping and strafing also. Therefore, when you're in these close range spray fights with a ton of barrel stuffing and crazy movement, you would definitely want your sensitivity to be on the higher side. Being super accurate doesn't really matter if you're using an SMG because you fire so quickly. It's more about just moving your crosshair fast enough to track the enemy no matter which shot dodging tactic they try. But we got such a major overhaul of the weapon meta in Season 4 that I think it really changed the high versus low debate when it comes to look sensitivity specifically. Now, close range fights are back to being dominated by high damage shotguns for the most part. Of course, SMGs are still somewhat solid cleanup weapons, but the two most dominant options at close range right now are pretty clearly the pump and the charged shotguns. With those weapons, precision is absolutely everything. If you're consistently missing your first shot because your sensitivity's too high, it's gonna hurt you a lot more than taking an extra split second to line up your shot because your sensitivity's on the lower end. And yeah, sure, with a lower sensitivity, you are giving up a bit of extra speed when it comes to flick shotting, and that's actually somewhat powerful with the pump, but honestly, on console or just controller in general, I don't think that's a huge deal. Unlike on mouse and keyboard, flick shotting should only be done as an absolute last resort in fights, and because of that, I definitely wouldn't base your sensitivity around it. So I've personally used 38% for the last couple months, and I was really just about to bump it up if Season 4 was another spray dominant meta, but that's obviously not the case, and if you find that you're really struggling with shotgun aim, one of the more simple ways to try to improve that is just to lower your sensitivity a few percent. The next sensitivity category that we need to cover is ADS sensitivity, and I think that this one is a bit more straightforward than look sensitivity. First off, for this sensitivity category, I would consider anything under around 11 to 12% low, and then anything over about 15 or 16% high. I think that when it comes to ADS sense, it's pretty much always been better to be on the lower end. Back when Legacy was in the game, you could get away with using a higher ADS sense because AR aim assist was so strong, but now it's basically non-existent. And because of that, it's really hard to keep your crosshair attached to enemies if your sensitivity is really high. And unlike with non-ADS sensitivity, it's not like you're ever going to be flick shotting while ADS. The main benefits of higher ADS sense when it comes to AR aim is that it allows you to switch between targets quicker, and also you can track enemies who are using fast movement items a bit better as well. But now that the launch pad is gone, that second one is definitely a little less important, and I just don't think either of those positives are worth giving up the extra precision and accuracy that lower sense gives. However, one thing that may be worth considering for some players is that your ADS sensitivity is actually also your scope sensitivity. For some reason, Fortnite refuses to give controller players a scope sense option like we had on Legacy, so if you use a really low ADS sensitivity, it's going to make it super hard to snipe because your scope just moves so slowly. I'm not really a huge sniper myself, so that's never really been more than a minor inconvenience to me, but if you're someone that snipes every game, that may be the only situation where it's probably worth it to trade a little bit of precision and basically move towards the higher end of ADS sense just so you can snipe reasonably well. The next sensitivity section that's also pretty heavily debated when it comes to high versus low is building and editing sensitivity. This is probably the sensitivity value where you see the most variation in what people use, but that's also partially due to the fact that a lot of players still don't really understand how these values work. The values that you use for editing and building sensitivity are simply a multiplier of your look sensitivity values, so a player that's using a 1.5x multiplier could actually have a higher building sensitivity than someone using a 2.0. So this is going to involve a little bit of calculation here, since you're going to need to multiply your look sensitivity by your building and editing multiplier, but me personally, I'd consider low for these values anything under 70%, and then high would be anything over about 80%. Now for building sensitivity, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer that you definitely want to be on the higher side here. Building requires very little crosshair precision, but a ton of quick crosshair movement. Just think about how quickly you flick your crosshair when building something as simple as a 1x1 box, for example. And if that requires a lot of quick crosshair movement, just imagine what something like a really advanced high ground retake would require. So if you're someone with like 40% look sensitivity and only a 1.5 or 1.6x building multiplier, I definitely recommend bumping that up at least a little even if you're on console. For editing sensitivity multiplier though, it's a lot more dependent on your personal skill level as a player. I think editing requires less precision than aiming, but a lot more precision than building, so it's kinda right in the middle. For a long time, I used a slightly lower editing multiplier than what I use for building, because when I first switched to linear, I felt so in control of my crosshair while editing. So if you find yourself in a similar situation where you're messing up your edits all the time, I think a lower value is totally fine and makes a lot of sense. But if you're someone who does a lot of editing practice and you want to really focus on speed because you feel like you don't mess up much, a higher sensitivity probably makes a lot more sense for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down the comment section below. In general, do you feel that you use lower sensitivity values or higher sensitivity values when you're playing Fortnite? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.